A pair of potentially groundbreaking cases on same-sex marriage go before the Supreme Court this week. Tomorrow, justices will hear arguments on whether to overturn California's Proposition 8, which bans same-sex marriage. Then on Wednesday, arguments on whether to uphold the Defense of Marriage Act. In a sign of the intense interest in all this, the lines for the roughly 50 public seats available inside the court started to form on Thursday. This drama comes as the public and political mood is clearly shifting. Yesterday, Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill came out for same-sex marriage. Even Republican guru Karl Rove now says he could see a Republican presidential candidate supporting gay marriage. Then there's this new poll. A majority of Americans, 58%, say same-sex marriage should be legal.
We're not asking for a new constitutional right. The constitutional right to marry is well established. In fact, the Supreme Court has ruled that you can't take away the right to marry, even from imprisoned felons. I think this is a basic civil rights issue, and I don't think that this is the kind of issue that's going to divide the court the way some other issues divide the court.
Let's bring in Aisha Moodie, an advisor on LGBT policy and racial justice with the Center for American Progress, and Jimmy LaSalvia, co-founder and executive director of GOProud. Good to see both of you. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
So the New York Times Frank about this, and his argument is that regardless of how the Supreme Court rules on either of these cases, gay advocates believe, quote, the final chapter of this story has in fact been written. The question isn't whether there will be a happy ending. The question is when. Aisha, is he right?
Absolutely. I mean, the tide has completely shifted on the, as you just announced earlier, the polling on marriage equality. And so we know that this is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And it was interesting, that article talked about, without regard to what the Supreme Court did, we know that the states are moving in the right direction. And so I think that this is inevitable.
You know, I understand, looking at the polls, that it would seem, and even the politicians, you see this move. But, Jimmy, you know, I was thinking about the fact that gay rights supporters were not welcome at CPAC, for example. And you know who was? Phyllis Schlafly, who was often credited with turning back the Equal Rights Amendment when in the 70s it seemed like a done deal. So is it possible, Jimmy, that the celebrations are premature?
Well, I can tell you, I agree with Aisha. We have reached a tipping point on this. I was part of a panel that was held in the same hotel at CPAC that the Competitive Enterprise Institute sponsored, and our room was packed, overflowing. And even the polls show that a majority of young conservatives support same-sex marriage. And Aisha mentioned that the states are moving on this. We can see that happening in states all across the country. And even today, the Columbus Dispatch had a poll where 53% of people in Ohio support rolling back their ban on same-sex marriage and legalizing it. So I think that while there are some still who do not support same-sex marriage, there are a lot who do, and the tide is absolutely moving that way.
You know, Rob Portman is one of the people who has shifted, and his son wrote an op-ed in today's Yale Daily News. He writes, quote, I'm proud of my dad. He's shown that he's willing to take a political risk in order to take a principled stand. He was a good man before he changed his position, and he's a good man now, just as there are good people on either side of this issue today. Are people going to be watching him, other Republicans, do you think, Aisha? Is it possible he's making it less risky for Republicans, some who may be in more swing districts or more conservative districts, to change their position?
Sure, I would hope that he is, but I want to underscore a key point about, you know, the kind of shift that we're seeing across the country. This is not partisan. Equality is not partisan. It's dignity and respect and justice and civil rights should not be partisan. And so what we're seeing is we see Republicans and moderate Democrats alike come to the table saying we support equality for everybody, we support marriage equality, is that, you know, they're responding not just to their own political base, but to the tone of the country. 70-something%, like 78% of independents believe in marriage equality, believe that, you know, my marriage, for example, is valid. And so when we see politicians shifting, I think we should, you know, start to hold them to the fire to acknowledge what Americans care about, what Americans believe, and not just the partisan aspects of this. Because, you know, at this point, the Republicans, you know, are kind of the fragile, you know, kind of side group that doesn't believe this just as a group. But, you know, when you have most independents, when you have, you know, almost all Democrats, then you pretty much have the whole country behind you.
So, Jimmy, what's the heart of the argument that you make to reluctant Republican lawmakers. We talked about this a little earlier in the program, but Politico reports that there are Republican same-sex marriage supporters with big checkbooks who have kept them closed up until this point. Is it the money argument you make? What argument do you make?
Well, I think that Republicans and conservatives are no different than anybody else. They know that marriage is good for people, and they want their gay family and friends to have that in their. But one thing the political reality is showing us is that there's room in the Republican Party for a variety of views on the issue where that wasn't the case not that long ago. And so you're seeing Republicans on both sides of the issue bringing our shared values to that issue. And
do you agree with Karl Rove that we could see a Republican nominee who supports it? Yeah?
Oh, yes. I mean, we're living in a very different political reality than we were in 2004 when Karl Rove was beating a different drum. I mean, this issue has changed, and Republicans are changing with it.
And yet, Aisha, you still have, at least as of the last election, it's very difficult to get through the primary season as a moderate or more left of center Republican.
I mean, it certainly is, but I keep going back to looking at the electorate and what do we need to win, right, as just kind of candidates in general. And I do believe that on this issue of marriage equality, this has become, a moderate issue. This is really an issue that's about civil rights, and most people know that and get that, and that's why you're seeing a Rob Portman and others say, I may be a Republican, but I'm going to just come out in front. Even a Claire McCaskill, who had a tough time. She thought she was going to have a tough time in her primary. Come out and say, you know what, this is the right thing to do, because this is not about, just electoral politics. This is actually about justice and civil rights for all. And when we decided in America, hundreds of years ago, that we're going to treat everybody equally and that that's what our Constitution is premised in, then we have to do that for everybody.
Two huge cases tomorrow and Wednesday being argued in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Of course, we'll be following them very closely. Aisha Moodie Mills, Jimmy LaSalvia.